Hey guys, welcome. My name is Manoj Fernando. I'm an AWS community hero. Now, if you guys are new to this channel, you can consider subscribing to it because I'm releasing a video on every week. Now, welcome all of you to this episode. In this episode, we are going to talk about real-time and offline API design with AWS Amplify. Now, did you guys know if your application takes more than 10 seconds to load data, your users probably not use it? And that's true because a study shows that compares the user's reactions versus the page loading time or the data loading time. It says the users only perceive the application is fast and instant if the loading time falls between 0 to 300 milliseconds. Now, if it is about 1 second or 2 second or 3 second, the users will think like something is loading. There's a background processing happen, so I have to wait. So it is not as pleasant as instantly loading, right? But things get much worse if the loading time is more than 10 seconds. Then they will probably not even use your application and they will opt into a different one because there are many other applications that may address your SOAM problem, right? So that's why the user experience really matters when it comes to modern application development. So in this episode, I'm going to show you a photo sharing application that I have built sometimes back, which will utilize real-time and offline capabilities to improve the user experience. I hope you'll enjoy it. I'll see you in the other side. Okay guys, now first let's clone the repository from GitHub. You can go to this GitHub repository, photo album. Now this is the full URL. Let me put it in a zoomed view. So http github and /photo album -demo. Copy this GitHub URL and have it cloned. Now first let me walk you through the application. So I have started the application and that is a React application. So at first you are presented with the login screen. So I can log in. Now this is a photo sharing application, guys. So first we can create photo albums. Now as you can see, I have already 2 photo albums created, and inside these photo albums I can add my photos. Then I can download it or I can view it. So that's going to show. Now, this is one of the images from reInvent. Now I'll go back and let me show you a couple of things. First, let's create a new album. I will call this album Cars, and I click create album. As you can see, when I click create, the car album has been shown. So this is called optimistic response. So that means even before the album is created in the database, the UI has updated it. Now let's say for some reason the creation of album Cars is unsuccessful. So in that case, this record will automatically be taken out from the front end as well. So we'll explore that in a little bit. But now I want to show you something else. So I'll take another browser. So in this case, Firefox, and my Chrome is up and Firefox is at the bottom. Okay. So I'll go to the same URL, localhost/albums. I'll be automatically logged in with that user. Can you see? The Cars album we just created is there, my album and YouTube album. Now let me show you another thing. So let's create another album, planes. You can see when I click create album, this Chrome updated real fast with optimistic response. But Firefox has updated once it is properly created in the database. So it's near real time and the update has been propagated to all the clients. So that is the real-time aspects of this application. Now I will show you the offline functionalities as well. For that, I will take an inspect element in Chrome and I will go to the network tab to inspect the network requests. Now under network, you can see we are currently connected. So the status is online. Now I can switch it to offline. Let me do that. So once it is offline, the Chrome does not have any connectivity to the internet. So let's create a new album. Let's call it offline album and I will create it. You see no request has been made. So that is okay, right? Because we don't have any connectivity. But our optimistic response updated our UI. Can you see still the Chrome has not received that offline album because this is not yet created in the database. Now this is great, right? Now our application can work offline. So let's simulate the application coming back to online, right? So I'm going to click here and set online. Then ideally that should trigger a backend call and create that offline album. So let's see that. I will click online. There you go. This is the backend call, and as and when this is created, the new album has been appeared on Firefox as well with real-time updates. Okay, now let's actually clone this repo and spin up all the resources and see the implementation in detail. So let me close out this Firefox browser and expand my Chrome. I will go to GitHub and clone this URL and get back to my desktop, and I'm going to do a git cloning, git clone the URL, and you see the photo album folder has been created. So I will cd into photo album, and let's see, the files are there. I will open it in Visual Studio Code with code space dot. Okay, so this is the application code. So I want you to remove this Amplify folder. Just take that out, right? Now the first thing we need to have is Amplify CLI globally installed. So in order to do that, you take the integrated terminal. You can install CLI globally with npm install -g at AWS Amplify /CLI. Hit enter. I already configured that. And afterwards, you have to configure your Amplify by using Amplify configure. So here you can create a profile in AWS and create an IAM user that will do the resource configuration on behalf of you. So there you can walk through the instructions. So it automatically redirected me to the AWS console, and now hit enter. Then it asks you to pick the region. So I will pick US East 1, then provide a username and follow this instruction. Then you will be able to create an IAM user. I have already done that, so I'm not going to repeat the steps. So I will exit. And then the next step is to install the dependencies that is required for this project. Now, if you go to package.json file at the root level, you can see there are a bunch of dependencies. So we have installed, or we need rather, AWS Amplify library and AWS Amplify React library. Now AWS Amplify React library will give us that nice authentication, the login, sign in up, sign out, the UI component. For that we need AWS Amplify React and AWS Amplify in order to communicate with our backends. Then we are installing AWS AppSync and AWS AppSync React libraries as well. In our application, we are configuring three main resources. First, we will have the GraphQL backend. We use GraphQL to make our backend quite flexible. So if this application runs on any type of devices, those devices can request only the data that is required to populate in their UIs. So we use GraphQL in order to send those flexible queries. And AWS has this managed GraphQL service AppSync. So first resource that we create is AppSync endpoint. And the second AWS service that we are going to use is a AWS user pool. AWS Cognito user pool will manage all our users, and it will have all the scalability aspects, so we don't have to worry about that. And that is decoupled from our application as well. And that is the second resource. The third resource is a S3 bucket. Now S3 bucket is required because we are storing images or photos inside albums, right? So those photos will be stored in S3. So those are the main three resources that we are going to add. Now before adding those resources, we need these dependencies to be installed. So let's run npm install or just yarn. So I will take the integrated terminal here and just type yarn, or you can type npm install. Okay, now our dependencies are installed, and first let's initialize an Amplify project. So for that I will type amplify init and hit enter. So let's give a name for this project. photo album YouTube, and we can provide an environment. So let's create a dev environment, or you can name it anything. I will type Visual Studio Code is my editor, JavaScript, it's a React application, and source directory source, build directory build, and this is my build command, start command. All right. Now here it's going to ask my AWS profile, which we have configured when we do Amplify configured. So this is my profile, YouTube. Right, now it's initializing the basic resources in AWS Cloud. Okay, now it has successfully created all those first initial resources. Now it's time for us to add those resources we talked about. So there are 3 resources. So let's add API. Now the interesting thing is when we add API, it will have the dependencies for our Cognito user pool. So during this wizard, it's going to create a user pool as well. So that's easy for us. So let's add API. Amplify add API. It's going to ask what type of API do I want. I'm using GraphQL. API name, I will accept the default. Oops, it says you can only use this. Okay, for that I will type photo album YouTube. And this is the place it's going to ask about authorization. Here I can say, okay, my authorization should happen from Cognito user pool. Then it's going to configure a user pool as well. So here I will accept default configuration. I will use username. Okay. Now it's asking, do I have an annotated GraphQL schema? Now in GraphQL, there's a schema. So schema defines all the resources that need to be provisioned in the backend. So in this case, do I have a GraphQL schema? No. So I will say no. So do I want a guided schema creation? Yep. So I will choose the second one to many. Do I want to edit it now? Yes. So it's going to open that up. So here's my schema.graphql. So this is the boilerplated code. Now in the project directory itself, at the root level, you can find there are some example GraphQL schema. Example.private GraphQL and example.protected GraphQL schema. Double click on the protected GraphQL schema and just copy this schema and go back to your schema.graphql and take them out and paste that in. Now let's quickly walk through this. Now I am configuring 2 types of resources. First, it is an album and there's a picture. Now both of these types are annotated with @model directive. So this is going to create a DynamoDB table for both of these types. Not only that, it's going to create all the mutation, subscription and queries as well, right? Which is really easy for us. An album has an ID, it has a title, it has an owner, created at date, and it has a list of pictures. You can see this pictures attribute is referencing my picture type. So it's accepting an array of pictures, and how we have done the connection is by using @connection directive, and in picture table we have an album that reference the album as well, and it uses the same connection. So with that we are connecting these 2 types. So album has list of pictures of picture type, and picture has an album attached to it of album type. You can see it is not an array, but it is just one album because pictures always belongs to a one album. So great. So there's a one-to-many relationship between album and pictures. And in picture type, you can see there's an attribute called file, and that is referencing a type called S3 object. Now this is a complex object type that Amplify supports. You can see this S3 object type is referencing this type, and it has an attribute called bucket, region and key. So what this does is, as and when you provide the bucket name, region and the key, the object key, it's going to upload that image into a S3 bucket that we are going to create in a bit, and you don't have to write any code about it. So it happens automatically from Amplify itself. And we have visibility enum as well, but let's not go in that details. So I will save this schema, and here I will hit continue. Okay, so 2 resources are now created. Now we need to create our S3 bucket, because here we are referencing an S3 object as well. So in that case, we need a S3 object. So let me clear the screen. I will add Amplify add storage. So here it's asking me whether it's a NoSQL database or a content. So it's a content because it's an image, and it's going to ask a friendly name. I will just choose this itself, and a bucket name, I will choose the same thing. And who has access to that? I will pick both auth and guest users. And auth users can create, read and delete. Okay, and hit enter. And our guest users can only read it. Now the guest users are whomever not logged into the application, right? So hit enter, and it's asking whether do I need to trigger a Lambda function. So in this case, I don't want it. Now, if you are creating a thumbnail from this S3 image, of course, you can attach a Lambda function that does that functionality. But in this case, we'll say no. Okay, so that is also configured. I can check all the resources I created by Amplify status. Now you can see 3 resources are here. So let's do Amplify push. That will create all these resources in AWS. So it's going to create CloudFormation stack and then provision all those resources. We can actually look at that CloudFormation stack. Now before that, it's going to ask me a couple other questions. Okay, code generations. Okay, I want it in JavaScript, and all my GraphQL mutation queries should be in this folder. Okay, I will accept this. Enter. Okay, now it is updating resources using a CloudFormation stack. We can actually look at that. Let me go to CloudFormation, and you can see I have 3 stacks, or 1 stack and then 2 other nested stacks. Now if I click on these stacks, I can check the template. So this is the CloudFormation template that Amplify has automatically created for us. So it's going to create all these resources we have specified. Now it's creating a nested stack for storage. So basically this is creating an S3 bucket for us. So this is already completed, and there's another stack that creates all the user pool stuff as well, I guess. Let's see. Yes, it's user pool creation. So it's no magic. Amplify uses CloudFormation to create all those resources. We don't have to author those templates. All right, now the resource provisioning is completed. So it took me about 10 minutes or so. Now if I go to SRC folder, I should see AWS export file. Now if for some reason the information is not available in this file, you can clear the screen and do amplify env pull -- restore. So that's going to pull all the configuration from your environment and populate this AWS export file. Okay. Now this file, it references all the backend resource configuration. So we can import this file in our application and use these resources. That's what we are going to do. So let me show you how we have configured in this application. Now if you go to source folder and app.js file, now this is the main file of our React application. There you can see we are getting or importing that AWS export configuration, and we are doing amplify.configure, passing that configuration object. So that's all you need to configure backend resources with Amplify. Now since we are using AWS AppSync SDK, now if you go to package.json file, we are using AWS AppSync and AppSync React as well. We use AppSync in order to add offline functionalities, because AWS Amplify client that communicates with our AppSync endpoint does not provide offline. So in order to provide offline, we have to use AWS AppSync SDK. So since we are using that, we need to configure an AppSync client as well. So this is where we are configuring it. So we will create a new AWS AppSync client, and we provide where the GraphQL endpoint is. So that is we referencing from the export file, and the region, and also the authentication type, and all this information is available in AWS export file. You can see the region here, GraphQL endpoint, and authentication type, which is Cognito user pools. And we have another attribute called complex object credentials. Now this is required in order to authorize calls to Amazon S3 because we are creating an S3 bucket. So in order to work with that bucket, you need to set up these S3 credentials as well. So this is basically using IAM credential. You are getting those credentials from the currently authenticated user, currently logged in user. Because currently logged in user, there's this IAM credential attached to him. Those IAM credentials will be used to call upon the S3 bucket. And once that client is created, we are going to use Apollo provider. Now this Apollo provider is imported from React Apollo library. Now this React Apollo library provides this Apollo provider, and as the client we are passing that AppSync client we just created up here. So all the queries, mutations and subscriptions will be managed by this Apollo provider. Now you can see there's another directive called rehydrated. So rehydrated is basically coming from AWS AppSync React library. Now this is all you need to add in order to have your application running offline. So if you want to add offline support, just wrap that with rehydrated component and your application will work offline. Now you have already seen how it works offline, right? And then this is our application, and we are referencing here, and our application is wrapping with authenticator that will provide that sign in, sign up, the UI component. Otherwise it's just referencing my application here. So the application has a couple of routes, /album and album/id to get a particular album. So those are the two main routes, and this is how we have configured our application. Now these two routes, /albums and /album/id, is referencing two components. There's this component album, and album is available inside container /album. You can see there's a container folder. Inside that, this is the code for album component, and you have album photos, which shows all the photos inside the album. Now you can go through this code since it is already available, and let's run our application. I will take a terminal and run npm run start. Is the one that previously loaded. Let's wait until this is refreshed. Okay, great. So now I am presented with the logging screen. I can't log in with anybody because I don't have a user. So you can create a user, and then once it is created, you can log into the application and see how it works. I have already shown you that. I think it's a good time to wind up this video, and I hope you guys enjoy this, and I'll see you in another video. Thanks.